Hello everyone, it's Amy and welcome back for week 56 of Build Your Stash and Craft. This week we're going to make our own molds with the amazing mold putty, and we also picked up some clay so that we could try out our molds. And you can use these molds with the clay, you can use them with the wet toilet paper, you can use it with plaster. All sorts of things. Anything that you can use in any other mold, you can use in these molds. Now I have tried the make your own molds using like silicone caulk, and I've tried it a few different ways, a few recipes that I've seen on the internet, and I just never had the best luck with it. I'm not saying it didn't work at all, but I didn't have the best luck with it, and it really smelled bad. And it's not super cheap either. So it's one of those things where I felt like having the amazing mold putty would just be a better thing to have for your stash. So I've made a couple because you have to let them cure for 20 minutes once you make them. And I wanted you to see what they look like when they're done. So this is just a locket that I had. And so I did one side because I thought that was really a pretty design here. And so we'll unmold this and see what it looks like. Now when you're unmolding, just do it carefully. You don't want to rip your mold. And I do make my molds a little bit thin because I want my mold putty to go a little further. So, and it does say that the thinner you make it, the easier it is to unmold from your other projects because it's very bendy. And this is what we've got on this one. Now when you use something that's been designed by someone else, you cannot make things out of that and sell those things because this design was designed by someone else. So, but you can also make things, if you wanted to make molds to sell, you could use things like naturals. Now here is a shell that I did. And I also have seen people where they put them in some kind of a mandrel to make their mold exactly round or whatever. So I thought I would show you. This is a milk ring, which is usually like this with the little pokies on the inside. And so I just flipped it around so that it was smooth on the inside. And I used that to make a pretty round and very even. Like, see, this has an angle to it because I pressed it in. I make mine this way, but I just wanted to show you. I've seen people like put their product in the bottom of a bowl that has a very flat bottom and then push their mold putty around it so that it was round. So you can do that if you'd like to, but we're going to unmold this one. Now I can tell as I'm unmolding this, my bottom is very, very thin. I can feel that now as I'm unmolding it. So, which is another reason I like to push it on myself, because then I can kind of tell how thin I'm getting. This one I had to push into the product. But I'm going to loosen this. It has a lot of little pokies and everything on it, so I want to loosen it slowly so I don't rip my mold, hopefully. And there we go. And so this is what we have. Now this mold was designed by God. He made this shell. So therefore, if I were to sell this mold or to make cabochons with this mold and then sell them, I could do that because this is not someone else's design. And so I wanted to show you, like, this is what I molded. And you can see that it has different layers, but they're very close to each other, so that you really are going to get some dimension, but it's not going to stick super far off your page. Now I also have a shell here that if I were to mold this shell at the top to get the roundness, I would have to push it down this far, and then if you were to put that on a page, that would stick up over 1/2 inch. So that's why I did not use this shell. Now you could use this shell on the flat side and press it in like this, and then get this design, but you also would have to press it in far enough to get past this point so that you would actually, it would look like a shell. So then it still would be very tall by doing that. So that's one thing to look at when you're thinking about what your molding is. How far do you have to press it down to get the whole thing of what you're looking for? Because in order to get this point, we'd have to come down about this far because you want to go just a touch past that. So you know, that would be a very tall embellishment. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just something for you to think about if you're looking for a flat embellishment or a tall embellishment. So I'll just show you how we use this. It comes in 2 sizes. It comes with instructions that are very easy to follow. And so to start with, what you do is you take equal amounts of both of your putties. Now you'll have 1 minute to mix this together, and then you'll have 2 minutes to mold your product. So that's one thing to remember, because once it starts to get rubbery hard, you won't be able to mold into it, and you cannot remelt it. So you have to have equal parts of both colors, and then you have to make sure that you mix them well. Now I just pull out a little bit. And what am I going to mold? I think I'm going to mold this acorn right here. And I want, you know, when you're going to do something like this, kind of try and decide, like this side is not so nice. So I actually like this side better. So this is the side that I'm going to mold. It's not going to need to be real big for that. So I'm going to use this much because it's going to wind up being twice this much. Now, sometimes I get this under my fingernail. So you want to make sure that you don't get the yellow in with the white. So I'm going to use a different finger. Because you don't want to mix these two together, because once they mix, that's the catalyst that makes them hard. Or I don't know where I came up with that word. I just made it up. So, but now my white is not quite as big as my yellow, so I'm going to get just a little bit more, because you have to use equal parts. It's not totally exact. If they're just a touch off, it's not going to make a difference. But if you have quite a bit more of one than the other, so I usually just roll a ball, and then I put my balls next to each other to see, do they look about the same size? They do. And then you mix them. And once you start mixing them, you have 1 minute to mix them, and you need to make sure that you mix them well. So, you know, it's going to come out just a little bit of a lighter yellow. And as you're doing it, you know, you can kind of spread it out and make sure that you don't see any white in the yellow. And if you do, just keep mixing and just kind of knead it until it's all mixed very well. If you knead it a little bit, kind of flatten it out. I've got a little bit of white over here and up here, so I need to knead it some more. And they suggest that when you put the putty to make your mold, that you put it over what you're making and press it down around. So, and that is what I usually do, except if I have something that's really flat, then I usually sometimes I will just put my putty down and roll it out and put that flat item into the putty so I can see how far it's pushing. Or I may want to push it a little further. So there we go. And looking at it, I don't see any more white anywhere. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll it into a ball. The biggest part about this part right here is that when you roll it, make sure, like, I don't know if you can see here, but there are creases here. If you put that crease on your product, that crease is going to stay there, and it's going to show when you mold. So because surprisingly enough, these, when you mold something in these, it's very, very detailed. So now it's very smooth, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my acorn and find the spot that I want. Now sometimes with your naturals you might get a little bit of dirt. I've got a little bit of a crease right here, but this side looks great, so I'm going to put that crease on what will be the bottom. And then I'm going to spread this around. I want to make sure that I get the point of my top, and I want to make sure that I get this little point of the acorn, because that's really what makes it an acorn. Kind of even it out. I am getting a little bit of the dirt from my acorn in my mold, but I have made a few molds with naturals that have dirt on them, and it did not make a difference. So I'm just going to kind of flatten that out a bit. And now I can tell that I'm pretty close right there on the bottom. If you make one that your bottom is too thin, or you get a hole in the bottom, you can make a little bit more putty after it's dry. You can make a little more putty and add it to that thin spot. You have 1 minute to mix it, and you have 2 minutes to get it molded. Once it starts turning rubbery, you can't adjust it anymore. So I'm going to go like that. And then I kind of like give it a little push. I don't want to push my sides down because I have them up where I think I want them. So I'm just kind of gave it a little push in the middle so that it has a bit of a flat spot on the bottom. So if I were to pour plaster into there, it wouldn't be rocky. I do have some that do rock because I kind of went around like this when I molded it. So the other thing I wanted to do was, I love faces. And so I am going to mold the face of this Barbie doll. And so I'm going to take equal parts of my yellow. Now I'm probably going to need a little more than I had before. So I'm going to make my ball just a little bit bigger. Don't want to get my yellow in with my white. And I don't ever put any back. If my balls are different size, I normally just, whichever one is smaller, which in this one my white is again a little smaller, whichever one is a little bit smaller, I just add to it. That's just me. It doesn't say you can't do that. I just want to make sure that I don't contaminate my jar, because these won't get hard until you've mixed them together. So that looks pretty good. And so I'm going to mix these together so that I can do my doll face. And then I will show you that you can kind of roll it out flat so that you have a flat mold, because I'm going to do that for my buttons. And I'm just going to mix this until it no longer has any white. It still has white here, so definitely it needs more mixing. If you don't mix it completely, I don't think that it will harden correctly. It may not harden at all. I'm not really sure. I've never had one that I haven't mixed well enough. And it says it takes approximately 20 minutes for them to cure. So after I get these next couple done, then I will turn off the camera and come back when we can unmold them. Okay, kind of look in a few places, make sure I don't see any white, and I don't. So now I'm going to roll it into a ball, making sure that I get rid of any creases, or at least have one really good side that's not creased. And that looks really good. Now because her face is quite large, I'm going to flatten it down just a little bit. And then what I'm going to do, because now I have all the lines from my hand on there, I'm just going to put it, and I put parchment down here. It doesn't say you have to put it on parchment. I'm just going to kind of press it on there a little bit so that I don't have those marks of my hands on my clay before I put it on the face. And the one thing is when you put it on, you want to make sure, try and keep it like pressed to the center as you're pressing the center so it doesn't press out, because you want to make sure that you don't get it too thin in the middle. But make sure that you press into all of those spots that you want to get. We want to get her nose and her lips and her eyes. And so I'm going to make sure that I press really well. And I want her to have a chin, so I need to make sure that I come down around that. I'm going to try and make these kind of even this way because it is a mold, so whatever you put in there is only going to, like if you were to pour plaster, you'd only be able to pour it as deep as your lowest spot before it started coming out. Give that just a little bit of a push. Now again, this Barbie doll is not my design, so I would not be able to sell these faces, but the nice thing about using a face of some sort like this also is that you can, it helps you sometimes if you want to make your own face, but you just don't know where to start. Sometimes this will give you a start, and then you can use that. You can put your clay in there. You can't do it with plaster, but you could put clay in there, and you pull the clay out, and then you can change it and make it your own. But it just kind of gives you a little basis to start with. So I'm going to call that good enough. I give it a little push so that it's kind of flat on the bottom. You don't want to push too hard because then you're going to push your I don't know what you're molding. You're going to push it more down towards the bottom of the clay. You could possibly push it right through the other side. Okay, and then one other quick thing. Now see, I think I'm gonna mold one of these. And the reason I'm gonna do that is because then when it comes out, I'm gonna have this nice little line here, and I will wind up with a circle with this line, with this center. So I could put a cabochon in there, I could put a circle of paper in there, I could paint a picture in here and paint the outside, you know, a different color, and maybe paint the raised part gold. You know, it'd just be a really nice base to make a project with. So I'm going to do these buttons here, and I want to do them all on the same one. And you're not supposed to remove your molded piece until after the 20 minutes has passed. So what I've done is I've taken I've just cut in some strips of cardboard, and then I just glued two together because I held them next to my buttons. I put my buttons here to make sure that my buttons were lower than the top of this, so I knew I had enough, I would have enough putty. And then I'm just going to kind of figure out how much room I need here to put my buttons in. You don't want to put them too close to each other, and make sure the side that you want to mold is the side that you put down. Like this one has a little, well, that's hard to see. This one has got like grooves on it. I want to make sure I don't put it this way. Make sure that you put it upside down. And then, actually, I don't really want that one. I had changed it for this one. So this right here will give me enough room. I don't have to make it any wider. So now I'm gonna just get some more of the putty. And because that doesn't dry out, I don't usually shut it until I'm done. But you can do that however, but just so that you know, I wasn't letting it dry out. And I definitely need some more white. Kind of roll them into a ball so I can tell if they're about the same size. And this time I have more white than yellow. So I'll get just a little bit more yellow. And this is going to need a lot anyway, so I probably should be just fine with that. And that looks like I need just a little bit more white. And I'm going to just call that good. Now I have a minute to mix this together and 2 minutes to get everything adjusted in it. So a few other things is just make sure that you have your smooth surface, and let's see here. This can be food safe. Once you've made these molds, you can then wash it really well, it says, with soap and water, and then it is food safe. Once you're going to make it for food, you're going to want to mark it so that you don't ever use it for anything else, because that could soak into the rubber, like paints or glues or, you know, anything that could be toxic. If it's food, if it's for food, you only use it for food. And wash it every time with soap and water, especially, it says wash it very well the first time after you've made your mold, very well with soap and water before you use it for your food. Okay, so I'm going to kind of separate this out, make sure I don't see any white, and I don't. See, and that's what makes all those creases, is when you like pull it all apart like that. So I'm going to move these out of my way. Okay, and then because I want a long strip, I'm going to kind of make it into a bit of a press it down a little bit. And then I'm just going to take a pen, I have one here somewhere, and use this kind of as a rolling pin and just roll it out. And actually, I did not put enough together. Now again, what I'm doing here is I've got some spots that I can see, so I'm just kind of rolling over it really well to get rid of those spots so that they don't show up in my button. And then when you are completely done, make sure that you don't have any little dent marks from your pen in there also. There we go. So we'll just get as many as we can. I'm going to start with this one because I really like this one. I'm going to make sure that I push it in there really well. Just kind of like rocking it a little bit. Because like I said, they say push it over top so that you can really push on it. And doing it this way, I can't. I've done this on my paper. So I'm not really sure if it's going to stick to my paper. Hopefully not. I do want to leave a little space between those. And I'm going to push this one down until the putty comes up between my holes. And which one of these do I want? I think I'm going to take this little one. So now I didn't make it big enough to do all that I wanted to do, but because I only have 2 minutes to get it laid out, and use my pen to push that down a little bit further. I only have 2 minutes to get it all laid out, and I'm not so sure about mixing more putty with putty that's already been mixed. I just left it, and if I want this button, I'll just make another mold with that button in it. So if you don't have enough, I would say use what you have for something that you're working on. You know, like let's say there wasn't enough to do let's say I wanted to do this and there wasn't enough to do it, well then I would just maybe do this button or do this butterfly, you know, whatever I had enough for, and then mix another batch to do that. So that is how we do that, and I'm going to let these few dry, and then I'll come in and mold them, and we'll put some clay in them to see what they look like. So I'll be back in just a minute. Okay, so it's been 20 minutes, so we'll take these few that we just did out of their molds, and we'll start with the first one that we did. Again, just break it free slowly, kind of push up from the bottom and peel back the sides. And I'm gonna, here we go. And that looks really good. I don't know if you can see the texture of the cap on there. We've even got our little point here at the bottom, so that looks really well. Now this one, the first time I put something in it, I'm pretty sure it's going to probably peel out some of that black, but that's okay with me. It's an acorn. I'm making it with white clay, so it's going to be painted anyways. Okay, let's see how our face turned out. See if there was actually enough definition in her face to make a mold. And there was. So here we go. Here's our face mold. And everything looks a little bit odd, especially faces, when you unmold them because they're backwards. Oh, and the one thing I want to tell you about making your own little roller things here. When I make these, I make sure that my lines go this way so that when I roll my pen across it, those are the supports on your cardboard. So when I'm rolling it, those supports are holding me up the same on both sides. If I were to make it so that they went this way, the pen could go boom, boom, boom down between each one of those as you were rolling, and it could actually give you like waves on your clay. So if you're going to make yourself some little supports, make sure that you have your the support of the cardboard running the length of those supports. So as you roll across them, it's going to stay nice and flat. So okay, we'll undo our buttons here. Let's see how bad they stuck to the paper. Try and remember to do it on parchment. It's not super bad. Boy, those just popped right out of there. Now, I've got a little bit of a problem here with this one, which is the one I really wanted. And I can't do anything about this now. This is molded, but I will try and see what my next one looks like. But what happened was I forgot to take the thread out of my button. So it's a little messy there. and it didn't mold much here because it couldn't get into the hole because the thread was filling it. And my thread is actually coming right up across here. And so here it's coming right up across right there. So I'll have to remake that one and take that thread out of there. So that's a good thing for you to learn, is make sure you take your threads out, or otherwise they could cause some problems. But yeah, and it's flat in the middle where the thread was going back and forth. Now maybe when I mold that, it'll look kind of cool. So this one looks really good. And then our little one. Now this one had like a little, maybe I put it in upside down. It's very flat, and it kind of has like the little like eye on there, and that's kind of what I was hoping to get, but I don't think I did. So there's the buttons. So not everything always works out perfect, but you can wind up using it anyways. Now for the clay, this is a pretty solid clay. They make all different kinds. They make some that are really soft, and some that are really hard. This is a baking clay, and so this gets baked at 275 degrees for 15 minutes. So you can just put it in your regular oven. You don't have to have a toaster oven. If you have one, that's great. But so you can just break off a piece and see how it's you have to get it conditioned. You also don't have to have a pasta machine or a clay machine. And I'll tell you what, the clay machines that they sell at the store are just pasta machines. So if you really want to have one so that you can roll out nice flat sheets and everything, look at garage sales, look at secondhand stores, and just find an old pasta machine, because people buy those. And just like any other kitchen gadget, pretty much, you buy them, you think you're going to use them, and very few people really use them, and eventually they just sell them at a garage sale, or they give them to Goodwill or to the Salvation Army. So, but the one thing with your clay is you do want to get it nice and conditioned, which just means getting it softened up, getting all of its different ingredients and everything mixed well together. If it's too hard, I've heard people say that like they leave it there, or they put it in a plastic baggie and they sit on it. I've heard people say they stick it under their arm. You know, right now in my house, it's very warm because we heat with wood. So I'm not having a problem with it. But if you have dexterity problems, you know, warm it up a little bit first, and that will make it much easier to mix. And this is going to be just like when we were mixing that and then getting ready to make our mold. You're going to want to make sure that any creases that are in it are gone before you press it into your mold, because those creases will show up. And the nice thing about this is if you put it in your mold and it doesn't work the way you want it to, like you had a crease in it or you missed pushing down on a spot or something, the nice thing with the clay is you can just take it right back out and just do it over again. So because until it's baked, it's going to be just fine. I have some clay that I got at a garage sale a long time ago, like probably 5 years ago, and it was hard when I got it, really hard. But I can still actually condition it and get it softened up and still use it, because until it's baked, it's not like an air dry clay where after a while, even if you try and keep it really securely wrapped up in everything, you know, after a while that can dry out. But your polymer clays, they don't dry out. They get kind of hard, but they don't dry out until they're baked. So this is pretty soft, and I'm going to say it's probably fairly well conditioned. You want to make sure that you knead it. That's what does the conditioning, is, you know, mixing it together like this. And you don't want to just get it warm. You want to make sure that you get it mixed. So let's take a little piece of this. I don't think I'll even need that much. And I'm going to try the acorn. I'm just going to kind of roll it into a ball, maybe make it a little ovally. And then I'm just going to, I think I have way too much, so there's no point in pressing it in there. Here we, whoops. Alrighty, I'm going to push this right in here. I think I still have too much. You definitely a lot of times it's like you need a lot less than you think you do. So I'm going to like start here and kind of push this way towards the bottom, because I really don't need it to be any taller than this. I'm just going to push like that and kind of rub my hands across the edge of the mold to kind of pull some of that off. Now, you can do it one of two ways. You know, you can really make sure that you're only getting to the edge of the mold, or you can let it come over a little bit and then just cut off any extra before you bake it. You do want to do that before you bake it, kind of trim it off. It's just easier than trimming it after it's already baked. Now that little tiny point at the bottom, if I try and pull this back into the point where only that little point is there. Okay, there we go. I did get it. I wasn't sure if I would be able to do that. I'm going to just kind of pull these edges in so that they're at the edge of my mold, so that when I take it out, I don't have to trim it. Or maybe I might have to trim it a little bit, like up here at the top. That's a very small amount at the top too, the little stem. Just kind of pulling it in to get to the edge of the mold so that it is the shape that I want it to be, and that there's nothing sticking out over the edges. Now, if I were to take this and press it on here to make it flat, there we go. Then I might still have to pull it back in places, or have something a little bit to trim, because that kind of squashes it out a bit. But now that's it. It's done. You don't have to wait for it to dry or anything, because it's not going to dry until after we bake it. So then we're just going to push our mold, and you kind of push up in the center and release it. And there is our acorn. And it turned out great. I do have a little bit extra here on the edges that I'll wind up trimming off, or just pulling back like this. The nice thing kind of with polymer clay is it's not super soft, so if you're very careful how you handle it, you're not gonna, like some of your really soft clays, if you touch them here, like, okay, I'm gonna hold that like that, but see, there's not gonna be a fingerprint on either side. Some of the really soft ones, and even the really soft polymers, if you hold them like that or touch them like that, you're gonna lose your design or put your fingerprint in it or something. So I really don't mind the ones that are a little more solid. But there we go. I think that acorn turned out really cool. Now I want to see what the face looks like. And then I'll show you, oh, what else do we want to do? I don't want to keep you here too long, but you can always fast forward through this, just in case you want to see what they look like anyways. But, so we've done that one. Okay, I've already conditioned this clay, I forgot, so I don't need to condition it that much. And again, I'm going to kind of make it a little bit oblong so that it fits the whole thing. And sometimes these come out really creepy looking. And sometimes they look really cool. So we'll see how this one turns out. But if they do come out really creepy looking, you can always just adjust it. Use the end of your paintbrush because they're nice and kind of rounded and small. You know, you can use your X-Acto knife to kind of, you know, adjust a little bit. You can use your pokey tools that we have. Probably the flat ones would work better than the Phillips ones, but just anything that you have that's small that can adjust it the way you want to. Okay, now I'm going to make sure that I press it down in there really well, because we want to get into all those details. I really forgot to do that before I was pushing the sides back. Okay, let's see what we have here. Again, we're just going to kind of lift each side until it falls out. And this is what we have. Not too bad. Now, I'm not so sure if her nose is super flat. Her nose here is flat, and so is her top lip. That's not flat because the mold is flat. It's because I did not push that into the mold. I didn't push it hard enough. Look, it even has her hair on it. So I am going to squish this back up again. And this time I'm going to make sure that I really press. Uh-oh. Well, do that again. Whoops. I'm just making a mess. Kind of want it to be smooth. I don't want a bunch of my fingerprints on it. There we go. Okay. I'm going to press really well, but hold it down so it doesn't stick to your hand and come pulling back out. Really press it into the nose. Really press it into the lips. And that's always press it into the deepest spot in your mold first, so that you actually can get it down in there. Okay, so I think I have that pressed down in there pretty good. I press it along the hairline because that was really cool. There's a lot of detail there. And now I'm just going to bring back the sides. Okay, and normally I would do this like more carefully. But I did kind of show you how to do it, so I don't want to keep you here forever doing this, but there, I'm going to call that good. Let's take it out and see what it looks like. There we go. Now she has a pretty nice nose, and she's got a little mark here next to her mouth, so I'm going to look at this. Now this would be like this, so it's on this side of her face, and there is a little mark there, so that is going to show up. Anything that's in your clay, it shows up right there. But I can make that just like a little smile line, and I can actually put another one. I can make that a little more detailed and put another one on the other side so she has like dimples. And again, we got the hair really well, and it's not super creepy because the eyes aren't super deep. That's what usually to me makes them creepy. They have really deep eyes. And now she has still extra around the edges, but we're not going to worry about that. And we'll try our shell and see how that one turned out. I always am curious as to how the natural things, or the things that are a little different, how they turn out. Okay, so let's start with the deepest point, which is in the middle. Okay, now this one does have way too much clay, so I'm going to just kind of rub on it to pull off some of that clay to get to those edges. And this is how you get a cleaner look right from the start without having to do a lot of adjusting afterwards. And then press this down well again. Whoops. I started to pull it up. Once you start to pull it up, you really might as well take it out, because you're not going to be able to push it back into exactly the same spot. So it's going to come out and it's just going to have edges on it. And that is how that one turned out, which is really cool. And had I pushed those edges back, it would be even cooler. But yeah, that turned out really well. It got all of that detail. And now we'll look at this really fine detail that we have on here. Now, the one thing with your buttons is it will push in little holes for the buttons, but it doesn't actually make a hole in it. If you want holes in your buttons, then just after you take it off, you can use a needle or a pin and just put it in the little dents. And, oh, no, this one I didn't get enough. Just put a little needle in there where your dents are and make holes for yourself. And the more that you do this, you know, the more that you'll learn little tricks that help you. And you can watch other people that know more about polymer clay and that type of thing than I do, because I just play with it. But it is really fun to make your own embellishments and have your own, you know, it's nice if you, let's say you don't have embellishments. Well, you make a few of these and now you do. And you can paint them any color. You can make them look like anything. Go through your, like my buttons are old buttons from my mom's button box. And so I love making molds out of those buttons because they were hers, but I don't want to use or get rid of or give away her buttons. And so that gives me a way to put her things on a project without actually losing it. Okay. And so I'm going to say that's probably pretty good. And let's take that one off and see. And again, when you break them free, you can just like go like this and peel it right off, but it's better to kind of go all the way around there and see how that just fell right out. And look at the detail on that one. That is gorgeous. I'll be making a few of those. That is just gorgeous. I love that. I'll really quickly, we'll see what this one button looks like, and then I'll do both of these buttons. And when you have 3 on a thing like this, it's pretty much easier to do them one at a time. Because if I have this one in here and then I go to do that one, this one is probably going to fall out as I'm moving it around to put the clay in that one. I want to really push that in there really well. I'm not going to do my sides like this, but you know how to do that. Then again, like I told you, to go around. And the deeper that your center is, oh, now this actually looks really cool. Okay, I don't know if you can see that, but see the thread? You can even see that there's like 3 or 4 little pieces of thread right there. Okay, I'm really glad that I didn't take that thread out because I really love that. That's cool. See, sometimes you think you make a mistake and it winds up being the best thing ever. Okay, so we'll do this one. And see, I just used this little bit of clay, and I've been able to mold all of these things. Oh, Papa's blowing the dog whistle. And so here's the button. See, I did not pull the edges back, so you know, we've got these edges on here, but that's where I tell you, if you rock across the back of your clay like this as it's in there, and then see, we've got holes, but there's no, see, I got a pin over here, but the hole doesn't go all the way through. So if you were to want it to go all the way through, just put a pin right through and then go round and round. Or your pokey tool or whatever you have at hand. And make sure that you do this before you bake it, because once you bake it, you won't be able to. And I did that very sloppily, but there we go. Now it has holes. So, and let's try the little one just to see if it by any chance actually does have that little eye on it. The little, I don't know what you call that. And again, I'm not gonna really bother with the edges, but don't forget to pull your edges in like that, and then you don't have to deal with them later. Okay, and it does kind of have that little bit of an eye between them, but not very well. And this is what I'm talking about, if you can see it. It's that little bit of an eye that goes around the two holes. It's not so great on this one. And so actually this one that I thought was going to be really great, I don't really care for, because it almost looks like it's messy because it just doesn't have enough of that little bit of design to make it look like it should. So, and maybe I didn't push it in there hard enough. We'll try that. Pressed it in harder. No, it still doesn't. So, that, I mean, it's nice. It's a nice 2-hole button. It's okay, but not as good as I wanted it to be. But the one with the thread in it, I think that has to be my favorite out of all of them. So, but that is it for these. And then you just bake these and you paint them any way that you want to. But you can get a lot of molds out of this mold putty. I'll show you what's left. Okay, so this is what's left of the two. And, you know, there's a little bit more on the back side than the front side. But they don't come full. They only come right to here, right to this line. So I've only used a very little bit. I would say I haven't even used 1/4 of it. Maybe about 20%. So there's a lot in there. And we got 1, 2, 3, 4. We got 5 molds. And they all really turned out very well. So I'll be back in just a minute to show you what, well, you know what? I'm going to just go ahead and show you right now what we're going to need for next week. We are going to need a Barbie doll, and we are going to need some sandwich bags, and our masking tape, and our water glue, some newspaper, and some tissue paper. That's what we will need for next week. And if you don't have newspaper, magazine paper would work fine. Just tissue paper will work fine too. But newspaper is a nice solid base. And next week we are going to make a dress form, so which I saw someone make on YouTube. So thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I hope that you like how these all turned out. What did I do with I lost my acorn. I don't know what I did with it. I probably squished it up. I bet I did. But thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope if you get some of this that you enjoy it, because it really is a great thing to have, and it's great for making all sorts of embellishments. And that's the thing. If you want to make a face for an art doll, if you want to make, you could make a piece of jewelry out of this. You know, if you don't hardly have any buttons, you could make buttons over and over. You know, this is a seashell, which also could be made into jewelry. It could be put on a page. These can be made into so many different things that you can use for so many different projects that I really do enjoy using this. So thanks again. I hope that you all have an outstanding day. Bye-bye.